the thing about these biopics is it's Hollywood. So it's fantasy land. It's not real. But it's sold to you as real. And a lot of sugar-coated, like, the narrative is being controlled.
The men running Michael Jackson's estate just charged the public $200 million to watch a version of his life they personally approved, personally funded, and personally edited. And MJ's own daughter called it full of lies. Think about that for a second. The people who claim to protect his legacy produced a movie his daughter says is dishonest, spent $50 million in reshoots to cut the chapter the original script was built around, then sent it to theaters and let $97 million walk through the door opening weekend. And the wild thing is, the chapter they cut wasn't cut because it was inaccurate or the director changed his mind. It was because their own lawyers found a clause in a 1994 settlement that legally stopped them from including it. These are the men who have access to every document Michael Jackson ever signed, and they claim they didn't know that clause existed until the movie was already done. You're telling me the men who made $10 million each in a single year running this estate missed that?
None of it's true. None of it's true. None of it's true. It's BS. They made it up. They lie.
Come on. You paid for a movie they built to protect themselves, not him. Michael Jackson biopic hits theaters, and the numbers were insane. $97 million opening weekend domestically, $217 million worldwide. Biggest opening day ever for a biographical film. Bigger than Elvis, bigger than Bohemian Rhapsody. People lined up in costumes. People cried in the theater. People went home and streamed Thriller like it was 1983 again. Black Twitter was celebrating. The culture was celebrating. Because for a lot of people, this felt like the moment MJ finally got his flowers on the biggest screen possible. The man gave everything to his music, to his performances, to an audience that loved him back with everything they had. And this movie felt like the world finally saying, thank you. Except here is what almost nobody asked while they were buying tickets. What version of his story did you actually pay to see? Who decided what made it into the film and what got cut? And why does the movie end in 1988?
Shit, I don't even know. Like, I can't even tell you that. Like,
15 years before he died, right at the moment his life was about to get complicated. You don't find that suspicious?
You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious?
Because the answers to those questions do not point toward a tribute. They point toward a business decision. And once you follow the money, the whole thing looks completely different. So let's talk about it. The version of this movie that almost got released looked nothing like what you saw in theaters. The original script, written by John Logan, the same man who wrote Gladiator and Skyfall, was structured around one specific moment, 1993, Jordan Chandler, the year MJ's world changed forever. The film was supposed to open with MJ staring at his reflection in a mirror, police car lights flashing behind him, investigators arriving at Neverland Ranch. That image was the frame the entire story was built around. The script opened there and closed there. The third act was devoted to showing exactly what those allegations did to the man the world thought they knew. They shot it, all of it. $150 million spent. Cast assembled. Director Antoine Fuqua, the man behind Training Day, delivering his final cut. They were in the editing stage. Release date already set for April 2025. The movie was done, and then everything stopped. Why? Because there was a problem. And the people who found the problem were not the director, not the writers, not the studio lawyers either. The people who found the problem were the same people who were supposed to prevent it. And by the time they found it, $150 million had already been spent building the ending they now had to destroy. Something that convenient has a name. It just depends on whether you believe in coincidences. At least I don't.
When MJ settled the Jordan Chandler civil lawsuit in 1994, the settlement came with a clause, a legally binding agreement that said Chandler's story, his identity, his involvement could never be dramatized in any film about Michael Jackson. That clause existed for over 30 years. And the men running MJ's estate, John Branca and John McClain, the two people who have had access to every single document Michael Jackson ever signed since 2009, claim they did not know it existed. The ones who signed on as producers, the ones with equity stake in the film, the ones whose entire job is to manage MJ's legal and financial legacy. They found out about it through a Financial Times article, a newspaper. So now you have a $150 million movie with an ending you legally cannot release. 22 days of reshoots get scheduled. The original third act gets thrown out entirely. The release date gets pushed back twice. And the new ending, the replacement for everything they just cut, the film now closes on the bad tour, 1988, right at the moment his life was at its absolute peak, before anything got complicated, designed, per sources close to the production, to leave audiences happy and uplifted. Now, you can believe these men genuinely missed the clause in the most consequential settlement of their client's life, or you can believe they found it when they needed to find it. Either way, the result was identical. The chapter that made the story complicated got cut, and they paid to replace it with a victory lap. Here is what that decision actually cost. The reshoots alone added between $15 million and $50 million to the production budget, depending on which source you read, with Puck reporting the additional photography hit $50 million on top of the existing $150 million already spent. And here is the part that matters. The estate covered those costs directly. Because of their equity stake in the film, they funded the operation that erased the ending. Think about what that means practically. These men paid tens of millions of dollars out of an estate that belongs to MJ's children and mother to remove the most contested chapter of his life from his own biography. Not to add something, improve something, to remove something. And then they replaced it with a scene designed to send you home smiling. Come on now, dog. The new ending is the bad tour, Wembley Stadium. MJ at his most untouchable, preparing to take the stage for another electrifying performance. It is a beautiful image. It is also a constructed one, because the men who built that ending knew exactly what was coming after 1988 in real life, and they made sure you left the theater before you got there. The $50 million cut a chapter, the $50 million built a new ending, and a $200 million production sent $97 million back through the door opening weekend. That is not a tribute to Michael Jackson. That is a return on investment. So who are these men? John Branca and John McClain have controlled the Jackson estate since MJ died in 2009. Branca was MJ's entertainment lawyer. McClain was his manager. When Michael died, he left them in charge of everything: the music, the brand, the catalog, the decisions. All of it. And they have done well for themselves. In 2021 alone, Branca and McClain took more than $10 million in combined compensation from the estate, more than double what every member of MJ's actual family received that same year combined. His mother, Catherine, his 3 children, all of them together got less than half of what the 2 men managing the estate paid themselves. And the catalog. MJ spent years being explicit about one thing. He did not want Sony owning his music. The estate sold it anyway for over $1 billion. These are not guardians. They are business partners who outlived their client and kept the revenue. And MJ's own daughter spent years trying to tell people that. She called the movie full of lies. She filed court documents. And the estate's response was to get her case thrown out on procedural grounds and send her the legal bill. That is not how guardians behave. That is how people with something to protect behave. Paris Jackson did not just quietly distance herself from this movie. She came out swinging. In September 2025, she posted videos on Instagram and said the script was dishonest. Said it was, and I am quoting her directly, full-blown lies. Said the film panders to a very specific section of her father's fan base that still lives in a fantasy.
The big reason why I haven't said anything up until this point is because I know a lot of you guys are going to be happy with it. Like, a big section. The film panders to a very specific section of my dad's fandom that still lives in the fantasy. And they're going to be happy with it. The thing about these biopics is it's Hollywood. So it's fantasy land. It's not real. But it's sold to you as real. And a lot of sugar-coated, like, the narrative is being controlled. And there's a lot of inaccuracy, and there's a lot of just full-blown lies. And at the end of the day, like, that doesn't really fly with me. I don't really like dishonesty. I spoke up. I wasn't heard. I off. That's it. Y'all are gonna like the movie, so just go watch it, go enjoy it, do whatever, leave me out of it. Something that, like, quite a lot of people are saying is, like, she hates her dad. She resents him. She wants nothing to do with him. Because I'm not, like, calling the shots on set, being a big shot producer of a movie that's filled with just inaccuracies. That's not my truth. That's not where I'm coming from. I just prefer honesty over, like, sales and monetary gain. Like, that's it. And I kind of just don't want anything to do with that. So I'm gonna off again. I'm gonna keep minding my own business. I suggest you do the same.
Think about what it takes for MJ's own daughter to say that publicly. This is not some outsider with an agenda. This is the woman who grew up in that house, who watched what the estate did with her father's name after he died, who filed court documents in March 2026 accusing John Branca of losing sight of his responsibilities, of using his role as executive producer to cast Miles Teller as a vehicle for building his own profile. Not MJ's legacy, Branca's profile. And the estate's response? They got her previous lawsuit thrown out on procedural grounds, then sent her the legal bill. His daughter tried to tell you the movie was built on lies, and the men who built it used the legal system to make her pay for saying so. That is not a guardian move. That is a silencing move. And the difference between those two things tells you everything you need to know about what this estate actually is. Here's the part the movie's opening weekend coverage completely buried. Wade Robson and James Safechuck, the two men from the Leaving Neverland documentary, have a trial coming. November 2026. Their combined lawsuit against MJ's company is seeking $400 million in damages. This case has been thrown out twice and brought back twice on appeal. It has been running for over a decade, and the attorney representing them said publicly in a statement to Rolling Stone that the estate timed the movie's release specifically to come out before the trial, to shape public opinion before a jury gets seated, to make sure the image of MJ in the public's mind is the thriller-era icon, not the man at the center of a $400 million lawsuit. And here's what makes that timing even harder to dismiss. A third Leaving Neverland documentary is being made right now. The director, Dan Reed, is building a trilogy specifically designed to run parallel to the November trial, a counter-narrative to the counter-narrative. So you have the estate's movie on one side, a documentary built to challenge it on the other, and a $400 million trial in the middle. The movie was not just a tribute, it was the opening statement. And the people who bought tickets in April were the first audience in a courtroom argument that does not officially start until November. The Cascio family were Michael Jackson's self-described second family. Frank Cascio wrote a book in 2011, called it My Friend Michael, praised him on every single page. They went on national television defending him, spent 25 years being some of the most publicly loyal people in his life, and then the estate paid them, quietly. Each of them received $2.8 million from the estate in a settlement. No public announcement, no court fight, just a check and an agreement. And for a while, that was it. Then one of them came back, demanded $213 million more. And the timing of that demand is the receipt, because it came right when the estate was finalizing the sale of MJ's share of the Sony catalog, a deal worth over $1 billion. The moment the biggest financial transaction in the estate's history was closing, the demand escalated from settled to $213 million. Then in February 2026, 5 weeks before the movie opened, the Cascio siblings filed a new federal lawsuit. The estate called it a desperate money grab. And what you believe about the underlying allegations is your business. But here's what is documented regardless of what anyone claims. They took $2.8 million, then sued for $213 million when a bigger deal was on the table.
then filed federal charges 5 weeks before a $200 million movie opened. The estate paid quietly when they could, and called it a money grab when the price got too high. What the financial timeline shows is a pattern, and that pattern did not start with the Cassios. Most people covered the Chandler clause. Almost nobody covered this. Diana Ross legally opted out of the Michael Jackson biopic entirely. Kat Graham was cast to play her, showed up, learned the role, filmed every scene they asked her to film, and walked away with nothing in the final cut because one phone call from Diana Ross's lawyers ended it. MJ's kids could not do that. They could not make one call and protect their father's story. The men running his estate made sure of that, which means an entire chapter of MJ's life just disappeared from the film. The Wiz, Studio 54, the period where a young Michael Jackson was being shaped into a solo superstar, how Quincy Jones entered the picture, all of it gone. All because Diana Ross had more legal control over her own image than the estate gave MJ's own children over his story. They had power where it served them, and they had none where it did not. Diana Ross opting out was not just a production headache. It was proof that the estate's control over MJ's story was always selective. They controlled what they could buy. They could not control what they never owned. And what they chose to buy tells you exactly what they were trying to protect. So let's put this together. April 24th, 2026. The Black community, the audience that has carried Michael Jackson's legacy longer and deeper than any other, showed up and gave this movie $97 million in its opening weekend. And what did they get? A movie that ends in 1988, before any of it got complicated, before the investigations, before the trials, before the settlements, before the lawsuits that are still running right now. Built by two men who are being sued by MJ's own daughter for mismanaging his estate. Funded by those same men to the tune of $50 million in reshoots designed to remove the chapters they could not legally or financially afford to include. Directed by a man who was told to change his ending mid-production by the people holding the checkbook. And the machine worked perfectly. The catalog streams went up, the merchandise moved, the cultural conversation reset around peak MJ, not contested MJ, right before a $400 million trial starts in November. Every single outcome served the estate. Not one of them required the full story to be told. Here's the thing about a legacy owned by an estate. The people who control it do not preserve it. They monetize it. Every decision gets made through that filter. What gets told, what gets cut, what gets funded, what gets silenced, what gets settled quietly, and what gets fought in court. All of it runs through the same question: what protects the asset? Michael Jackson spent his whole life being the most valuable product in the room. Turns out that did not stop when he died. The question is whether we keep funding the operation, or whether we start asking what we are actually paying for. The estate did not build this movie for MJ. They built it for what MJ is worth. And there is a difference between those two things that the Black community, more than anyone, should be able to recognize. Because we have seen this before. A legacy gets packaged, polished, and sold back to the people who loved it most. And every ticket, every stream, every merch purchase funds the people doing the packaging. And here's my question for you today. When the November trial starts and the counter narrative drops and the full story finally has to be told in a courtroom, are you going to be surprised? Or did you already know something was missing? If you want to see another legacy that got sold out by the people closest to it, that video is right there on your screen right now. Click now, and I'll see you on the next one. Panda out.